right, we are live and I already see people joining. Hello, hello. I am here with the lovely Sheila Ray Gregoire, who I'm going to allow to introduce herself in just a second. But welcome, everybody. We are here to have a conversation about parents and how the parental structure really plays into economics, which is something that I am very passionate about, and why egalitarianism is actually good for everybody. So yes, this is a
Yes.
loaded talk.
Yes.
We have already determined the conclusion. But Sheila, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, especially for my crowd who might not be as familiar with you.
Yes, I'm a podcaster, author, and researcher, and I got started. We've done the largest research studies of the effects of the typical evangelical teachings on women's marital and sexual satisfaction. So published a bunch of books out of that. Great Sex Rescue, The Marriage You Want, She Deserves Better. We got some peer-reviewed studies out of that. But basically, we're looking at how the way that evangelicalism has made women subservient actually hurts everybody. Yeah.
And I have been a longtime listener of the Bare Marriage podcast. I have binged back the episodes that I didn't from before
Yes.
before I started listening. I myself am an ex-evangelical. I've
Mhm.
deconstructed and am reconstructing is what I tell people. So I am very delighted and
Yes.
selfishly excited to interview Sheila today. And I wanted to frame the topic around economics because that's typically what I'm talking
Mhm.
about in my channel. And then we're going to let Sheila just fill in all of the evidence as to why, as she said, this is good for everyone.
Mhm.
And this is, I think the big take is that this isn't men versus women. It's
Mhm.
humanity versus dehumanizing each other, is really what it comes down to. And there are no good outcomes from not treating each other like
Mhm.
beings. So, I reached out to Sheila because, and if you're stateside, because I know Sheila's Canadian. For those who don't already know, I know we've got a mixed audience here. So, for Canadians, this is probably going to be like, what is Jackson Hole? But the Jackson Hole speech is our central bank, the Fed's, basically State of the Union time. It's when they
Mhm.
proclaim like all the economic news of the day. It's most they have several meetings throughout the year, but this is like their big one. It's in a place called Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which I actually used to live in and I love. It's right next to the Grand Teton National Park. It's an incredibly beautiful, gorgeous area. Um, and the big take from this year's Jackson Hole meeting in August was Jerome Powell, obviously talking about interest rates and whatever. That's all anyone talked about. However, there was another paper that was introduced at this conference by Dr. Claudia Golden out of Harvard. And it titled The Downside of Fertility. And when I post this full episode later to my Substack, I will make sure to put all of the references into the notes there. But basically, her paper is demonstrating that we kind of have two paths to walk here when it comes to fertility, because as most people know, unless you've lived under a rock for the last 10, 20 years, fertility rates are going down, especially in developed countries, way down. And economically, obviously, there's a lot of concerns with that. And in the States, we do have kind of the political forces that are, talking about, quote, more babies, as our vice president said, several months ago at this point. Um, and the solution from the complementarian slash conservative slash, probably more evangelical side is, well, if women just went back to their traditional gender roles,
Mhm.
stopped working outside the home, stopped, doing all that, we would have more children, which is not necessarily incorrect as far as like
Mhm.
that assertion. Because Dr. Golden does lay out that increased participation in the workforce decreases
Mhm.
fertility. Like that's a
Mhm.
pretty clear thing. However, that is a very binary way of looking at it. And what she kind of introduces is this secondary binary that happens now that women, and we in most parts of the world this has already happened. Now that women have entered the workforce in a substantial way, we are slowly closing the gender pay gap, and we're having some setbacks on that. But that's generally we're trying to close it. Now that we are reaching more egalitarianism for women outside of the home, we can go one of two ways to deal with the fertility issue. One is we can roll that all back and try to, have more babies that way. Or we can have more egalitarianism within the home, within the family management, the caretaking, the childcare, the household labor, all of that stuff. And this data is pretty clear that with countries where that egalitarianism has happened not only outside the home, but within the home, fertility rates go back up. So they took a hit, and then, we put in these social policies, we put in these new social norms, and then they go back up. And so there is actually a different path to which men primarily, I won't say just men, because I think there are women who have these concerns too, depending on what they've been taught about, love, family, and marriage and everything else. But there is this maybe kind of like almost visceral reaction from some, and I want to be respectful of it, that this is going to result in like oppression of men somehow, or oppression of the like the dissolution of a good family, and like what that all means and everything, and that it's men versus women. And Sheila, now that I've set that all up, I would love for you to talk about what the data actually says as far as egalitarianism, not only outside, but inside the home. And then what does that mean for fertility, the economics of that, and all that kind of thing. So feel free to go wherever you want.
Okay, yes, because there's lots that we could paint. So one of the interesting things that she brings up, and that I've seen in a number of different papers, is that the countries with the lowest fertility have two things going on. So one is they have very high equality in the economic sphere for women. So women can advance in their jobs. They can get senior jobs in business. They can get senior jobs in politics. They're very, very well respected economically. But in the home, they're not. So it hasn't caught up in the home. And so she's still expected to do all the childcare, all the laundry, all the cooking. And in those countries, fertility bottoms out. And so you see that especially in countries like Japan and South Korea with the 4B movement, in Italy, in Spain, etc. So Italy is a great example. A lot of us can picture that, where you have very, very high power women at all, throughout society, but the men are still living in their mom's basement, and they've never been taught how to cook. They expect a wife to come and do that for them. And so for those women, what incentive do they have to marry or have kids? Like it would be just a huge burden to take on. And so that's where you see fertility crater. Where you see fertility start to go back up is in countries like Scandinavia, where you have both economic freedom and equality in the domestic sphere. And fertility is still below replacement value. I mean, it's bad across all developed nations, which means that all developed nations are going to have to rely on immigration, which is something that America especially doesn't want to talk about, but yeah.
A whole other topic.
But it is a factor. And so we have this situation where, yes, we can either send women back home and restrict their labor force participation so that they'll have more babies, or we can tell men to man up. And
as Claudia Golden says, they can either be dads or duds. These are her literal words from the paper. It was cracking me up.
Yes. And that's exactly the choice that we're facing. And the simple fact is, you can't put the genie back in the bottle for economic. Like, women are not going to stand for it. At least, well, I would have said that. I don't know. As a Canadian, I would think women aren't going to stand for it, but I am a little bit worried about what's happening south of the border right now. For me, it's south of the border.
I'm blinking twice. I need help.
Yeah.
Don't save us.
Yes. So I don't think that you can put that genie back in the bottle in the same way. And so men just simply have to step up. And the problem is, we just haven't been confronting this. And we recently did a huge study of 7,000 people. It was matched pair, which means that we had both husband and wife in a couple. So if we were able to see, okay, if the husband does this, what happens to the wife? Or if the wife does this, what happens to the husband? So super cool. And one of the things we found is that the things that people think of as the most important things in marriage are not the most important things in marriage. So what are we always told? The biggest two issues in marriage, we're always told are, can you guess them?
It's sex.
Money and sex. There you go. We're always told those are the biggest two issues, right? So we had a scale of 0 to 100 for marital satisfaction, which we it was a previously validated question set. Anyway, I won't get into the logistics of it, but our methodology was to use the previously validated question sets, and we put them on a scale of 1 to 100. And most married couples are sitting from 60 to 90. Like, there's not a lot of people at 20. Like there's very little variation, which means that small changes matter a lot. And when you have money problems, you decrease marital satisfaction by about 5 points. So it is significant. When you have sex problems, so when you go from having sex several times a week to having sex once a month, you decrease marital satisfaction by 10 points. Okay, so makes
Not
sense.
nothing. Right.
Not nothing. But when you go from doing 50% of the housework to 90% of the housework, you decrease marital satisfaction 30 points.
Well,
even
have a winner.
even if you have a stay-at-home parent in the house. So this isn't just for people who work outside the home. This is for people in general. The simple fact is, when someone is doing 90% of the household and childcare, that is unsustainable.
Right.
They are not going to be happy.
Right.
And we don't talk about this enough. Like the incredible weight of mental load is almost entirely on women. Here's another example. We asked people, hey, when your mom needs a birthday card, who gets it? Who buys it for her? Right? And in 50% of marriages, roughly 50%, they both get their own mom, her birthday card. They both call their mom for her anniversary. They both take care of their own family of origin. And the other 50%, she takes care of it for both. And very few does he take care of it for both.
Right.
We saw a similar thing on medical dental appointments, right? So in roughly 50% of marriages, everybody makes their own medical and dental appointments, and the other 50%, she makes them for both.
Right.
Okay. So she's carrying a lot of the mental load.
Right. Even for the other adult in the house. We're not even just talking about like the kid, like she's taking care of the kids. It's like she's also taking care of him.
Yeah. So. She's taking care of him. She's taking care of his extended family. She's taking care of all of this stuff. Right. And that's exhausting.
Right. Sheila, I wanted to break in here real quick just to make sure, first of all, your evidence-based approach is 100% why I listen to you all the time, because I'm always like, the data rules, like this is how we make good decisions. Are you primarily studying heteronormative, heterosexual households?
Yes.
Okay. So
yes. So
full disclosure, everybody. Right?
Yeah, because our research, our population of research tends to be evangelical couples, because we really are looking at just at the effects. And one of our main research questions is, what is the effect of being taught certain things about gender roles, et cetera? So we're looking at the population that's been taught that.
Right. Yeah. There's a whole body of research.
Yes. And mental load has become a huge
buzzword
research area. There was an awesome article, I can't remember the authors, out of Australia in 2021, where they found that when the husband doesn't take on mental load and does very, very little housework, he becomes seen as a dependent. So she views him in many ways as another dependent. So just like her kids, and her libido crashes because nobody wants to have sex with a kid, right? And
and nothing less sexy than
exactly. And so multiple studies are finding that this dynamic where she is carrying all of the mental load doesn't work. And I don't think that dynamic is that different from the 1950s, 60s, the 1930s, 40s, et cetera. It's not that it's worse today. The difference is today that women have choices. So my grandmother, for instance, was much more like she was a polished public speaker. She taught at universities. And then when she married my grandfather, who was a pastor, she had to quit all of that. And that was really hard for her. And so, of course, she was on Valium. And I didn't know about this until my grandmother's funeral, when this little old lady, 85 years old, came up to me and said, I used to share a back fence with your grandmother, and she was such a wonderful woman. When I was having so many problems with my young babies and I just couldn't cope, she would give me these little pills and they would help me through it. Oh, my grandmother, the pill pusher. I didn't know about that. Right. But that's the thing. Like, back then, women weren't coping either.
Right.
It's not like mental load was easy for women back then either. It's just that they didn't have a choice. And today we have a choice. And a lot of women are saying, look, I would love to have a kid. I would love to get married. I would love to have a family. I just don't want to do it alone.
Right.
And that's valid.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, because it's like we got married because I thought we were going to do life together, right? Like
Hmm.
that's very popular in evangelical circles is to say we're doing life together and whatnot,
Hmm.
and they like to refer to that in marriages as well. And it's like, but we're not doing it, in these
Yeah.
situations where where women are carrying most of the mental load again within the household. It's like we're not doing it together. I'm doing it for you,
Hmm.
and that's not healthy. Would you do you have any findings that kind of talk about, you talked like marital satisfaction plummets
Hmm.
when the mental load, household labor, division of labor, becomes, extraordinarily unequal. Is that, is that like for men and like how does men's
Hmm.
marital satisfaction play into this? Because like for women, obviously it's cratering because we're like sick of it.
Yeah.
But is it like, well, men are just riding high and it's all great and and we're taking something away from them, or is there is there
there
mutual benefit to this?
there is a mutual benefit. So when mental load is shared, marriages are definitely happier. But the thing is, women's marital satisfaction falls quite drastically at around between the 5 and 10 year mark and continues going down until about year 20 to 25. And then there's a slight uptick. I think the reason there's a slight uptick is because a lot of people get divorced then. So the people who are still married at year 30, it's a survivorship bias going on there for those of you who know that term. Um, but multiple studies have found that women's marital satisfaction tends to be much worse than men's.
Gotcha.
And
So
ours found that too. So there is a benefit to men when mental load is shared, definitely.
right.
But on the whole, even when mental load isn't shared, men are still pretty happy with their marriages, much more so
Right.
than women are. Yeah.
So it's almost that's probably why it makes it so hard to sell is they're like, well, I'm generally fine. Like
Yes.
it's going fine for
Yes.
me. So why would I change anything?
Yeah.
And I remember like I've been married for almost 15 years now, and my husband is wonderful, a wonderful man. But one thing we really, I think the first 7 years of our marriage was defined by trying to figure out how to manage a household together because, first of all, our personalities are like complete opposites. I would live, in the minimalist paradise if I was allowed to, and he would live in a pile of books and stuff and whatever and be perfectly happy with that. And so, some of it was just like standards of care, right? Like what is
Right.
but we also just had we really did have to learn like what it meant to actually share the household. Like what does it look like to do a task from start to finish? And
Hmm.
and how do we communicate those standards with each other? That isn't just me screaming because I don't think he's, cleaned the kitchen to my standard and he thinks I'm being unreasonable and, and all that kind of thing. And it was difficult, but I will say that generally our relationship improved dramatically on both
Hmm.
sides. Once we had sort of cracked the code, which I'm not saying that we've never had we continue to have to work
Yes.
at it. It takes a lot of systems, a lot of like list making, a lot of for both of us, like a lot of communication. But it was there was a clear shift. Like
Hmm.
I remember when I stopped feeling like I was momming, and to
Hmm.
be fair, some of that was I was bringing some of that in to myself, right? Like I was like putting that on myself without really communicating. But also, I remember the year it was like in year 8 or 9, he came to me. He's like, you know what? I understand now why you would get so upset about this and um, why it was like so stressful for you to live in an environment where you felt like I wasn't pulling my weight, or that I didn't like care as much about how the household ran. Like I didn't,
Hmm.
and he was like, and now that I'm living in it, I'm actually much happier. Like he kind of was like, wow, having organization is kind of nice. I'm not as frantic. I'm not as stressed. Like this is
Yeah.
helpful. So it was mutually beneficial. It
Hmm.
wasn't crazy. I'm getting a message that my camera's out of focus.
It doesn't look out of focus to me. You look fine.
Oh, okay. All right.
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyway, yeah.
It looks
I don't know. Maybe to other people. Yeah. I
um
yeah,
yeah,
and that definitely is true. Like the happiest couples are the couples where they don't do their marriage by gender rules. They really pursue what they want to, like what they concentrate on the things they want to concentrate on, and it they serve each other and it works well. And that doesn't mean that you can't have a good marriage if she's a stay-at-home mom and he works outside the home. What it means is you can only have a good marriage if that is your choice.
right.
like like
Yes.
as soon as you feel like she's supposed to stay at home and he's supposed to be the main provider, then we see marital satisfaction dip. But when you're like, no, this actually works best for us. Like right now in our season of life, it works best if she stays at home and he works outside the home. And then, we figure out stuff in the home. That's fine.
Right.
As
Yeah,
long
that
as it's like we figured it out together and
right.
this is what we've chosen to do and we're both fully invested in it.
Right. I think that's
You
such an
know?
important point is like you and nobody else who's seriously in
Hmm.
the space. I'm sure there are
Yeah.
people who might say this kind of propaganda, but I've never heard them myself. But anyone who's seriously working in the space, using the data and the research, nobody is saying, men, you all need to get in the home, start
Hmm.
cooking and cleaning and taking care of the children full time. While the women go off to get their nails done. Like that's not what
Right. No.
anybody is advocating for. It is truly but you have to understand at that point that the playing field has been slanted this whole time, and
Hmm.
what we're saying is we need to level it economically. As you said, the genie is out of the bottle. First of all, cost
Hmm.
of living wise, the
Yeah.
idea that women can just go home and be at home is not realistic for like probably 98% of households. I'm kind of
Hmm.
making that up, but like seriously, it's
Yeah.
not.
Well, unless you're willing to live in a small apartment your whole life in a lower cost town. Yeah, like if you actually have dreams of buying a home, yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's, it's like, okay, so if our standard of living or whatever is going to be X, women generally are going to have to work, even if they're
Hmm.
working from the home, right? Even if you
Right.
have a
Hmm.
home-based type thing, like more power to you, Proverbs 31 woman or whatever,
Yeah.
but like have at it.
Yeah.
I have my own feelings about that, but that's a whole different topic.
She had servants, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. I know everyone misses that part. It's like there's an army of servants. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't notice that anyway. Um, I would stay at home too if I had an army of servants.
Yeah.
Um, and so we've kind of crossed the Rubicon economically.
Hmm.
We can't just wipe out. Women actually are the not only are they the bulk of the workforce, like they're actually the majority of the workforce now, but also the desire to work. I did some research on this like a year ago or so, and the desire to work outside the home has actually converged now. So it used to
Hmm.
be like men were, had this huge desire, women had like very little desire, and then as time has gone on and the gender
Hmm.
role kind of clamp down has not been as strong from people, leaving situation, or I should say leaving belief systems that really, push
Yeah.
that forward, like evangelicalism or even Catholicism. That has like converged to kind of show that when all things are equal,
Hmm.
like men and women generally want, they kind of have the same rate of wanting to work either inside or outside, be at home or work
Right.
outside the home. So I don't know how we're gonna like turn that back that dramatically without
Yes.
some real draconian measures, which I don't want to imagine is as a thing in our future.
Yeah.
So really the solution, as you're saying, is to just move the egalitarian needle forward for
Hmm.
men so that
Right. But that's not what's being talked about. Like Al Mohler, who is the president of one of the Southern Baptist Convention seminaries, he did a podcast back in March complaining that evangelical women don't want to get married.
right.
Right.
That's right.
And we talked about this on the Bear Marriage podcast too, but he was analyzing this one article that appeared in, I wish I remember now, was it the Washington Post or the Atlantic or something? But it was a really good article going in detail as to why a lot of women don't want to marry today, even though they still want kids. They want kids, but they don't want a husband. And it came down to the fact that a lot of men just weren't as educated as the women in their lives. They weren't as ambitious, and especially they weren't willing to do the housework. And so they were leaving it all to the women, and the women are like, look, if I'm going to be doing all this anyway, it's actually easier to do it for myself than it is to do it for two people. Um, and in his critique of the article, he never mentioned that part. So he talked about the problems with women having, all this education and men don't have as much education, and women are pursuing, university education and men aren't. But he never mentioned the fact that one of the biggest complaints is that men aren't stepping up to the plate at home. And, and we see this in a lot of other big name, people on the right wing, where they've said, women need to realize that their main fulfillment and the main happiness they're going to have isn't being a mom. And there's some data to support that. The data's getting kind of iffy. It's not crystal clear, but it does look like if you have a good marriage, that marriage is definitely the source of your best happiness. Like people with good marriages will say that my marriage is my biggest source of happiness. Right. People who have great marriages and then raise kids together will say my kids are my, biggest source of happiness, whatever. So, but if you don't have a good marriage, your marriage is not marriage does not automatically make you happy. Right. And being a parent does not automatically make you happy. So much of it depends on the dynamics around that. And so if we want the fertility rate to increase, we are simply going to have to raise boys to know how to clean a toilet and to notice when things need to be done. I think that's the biggest thing, is that boys aren't taught to notice. So boys may do what's on a list, but they're not taught to notice. So, when little Jimmy is fighting with little Susie, it's the mom who steps in and says, okay, what's actually going on here? The dad might yell and tell everyone to shut up, but it's the mom who's trying to figure out, okay, why is Jimmy beating up on Susie? Was this really Jimmy being a bully, or was Susie, was Susie poking at him?
Right.
Is this a longer term trend? Do we have to do some intervention? What?
There's a lot more that goes on.
There's a lot more. And what needs to happen is that dads need to start being involved in that kind of emotional labor of the family. So yeah, okay, little Javier isn't eating his vegetables. How are we going to get Javier to eat his vegetables? And a dad, if you are married and he is as likely to Google how to get my 3-year-old to eat broccoli as she is, you're going to have a good marriage.
Yes. That is again, when I'm thinking about my own marriage, where I saw a major inflection point was when my husband would say, so I was researching this thing the other day that we were talking about, and I was like, and again, not things that he had never done before, but it's just, he has continued. I always tell people, it's like, signs of a good relationship are when you're pulling each other towards your own strength. So his strength is in being able to be more go with the flow and relax. And my strength is in more of the organization and the, I won't say authoritarian, but just confident leadership.
Yes. Assertiveness. Yes.
And he, but I can be very extreme with that, right? I can take it to this level, and he helps kind of go it's okay if you made a mistake with that, Kate, that's not the end of the world. Whereas, with him, it's me being hey, we do need to think more than 10 minutes from now. Just, like you said, the immediate, kids, shut up, stop arguing.
Yeah.
Versus okay, what's actually happening here? And that, again, has made for a really great relationship. And we fight plenty. I'm not trying to sell a, fantasy over here, but it is that, that mutuality, right? And I know when it comes to mental load, and you can talk more about this too, it doesn't mean you have to split every single thing down the middle. I think you mentioned earlier, it's perfectly acceptable to be hey, I'm really the one who deals with sports practices. I talk to the coaches, I do the practice schedules, I do the whatever. Yes. My wife has nothing to do with it. She wouldn't know, anything about it. I've just kind of taken that, that I own that, it's mine. And it's, if that's how division of labor works for you, fantastic. Versus usually the wife is talking to the coach and doing the scheduling, putting in the calendar, making sure the snacks are packed and all this. And all he does is take, drive them. And then, oh, I've done the sports practice.
Yeah.
And so feel free, if you want to talk more about what division of labor can look like versus kind of maybe this
Mhm.
idea that one has of like, well, I'm not good at, certain things. I really am not good at certain things. So like,
Mhm.
if we have to split everything down the middle, it's like, are we really talking about 50-50 on everything, or what are we talking
Yeah. Yeah, splitting down the middle doesn't work, um, because first of all, how do you ever decide what's middle? How do you, it's so much easier just to say, "You own this and I own this." Um, and because things need like with the sports practices, for instance, right? There's always that stupid fundraiser where you have to get money from grandpa and from all the neighbors, and you can't just split that down the middle, right? Someone's just got to be overseeing it and making sure it gets done. With piano practice, someone's got to make sure that they actually do practice every day and that they're ready for the recital. And it's just easier if one person takes that because then they know the whole story, right? And I find even with housework, like my husband does the laundry. He just does all the laundry. I never do any laundry. I don't even know how to work my new washer dryer. I'm sure I could figure it out. I've been doing laundry my whole life, but we recently bought a new washer dryer and
and you get to touch it.
I don't know. He Googled it. He figured it out how it all worked. He didn't have me teach him. It was great. But I do all the cooking because I genuinely enjoy cooking and I don't enjoy eating his cooking. So like, you know, and he doesn't really enjoy eating his cooking. So like we do split things up. And that tends to work quite well. But it's just when one person is the default for everything, it gets exhausting.
Yeah.
Um, and that tends to be what has happened. And I think especially because women, a lot of our self-esteem is based in our homes, right? Like do we have a nice home? Men's really isn't in the same way.
Well,
And so
socially, if someone sees like a wrecked house, they're not thinking, why isn't the
what
man?
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And also your house isn't really an issue of pride for him in the same way. Whereas she's like, no, I want a really nice house. I want to decorate it. I want it. Like he really doesn't care. And that's not a male versus female. That's just the way we've been socialized, right? Like in other cultures, the man cares. Like it just depends what's important in your culture. Um and so it has tended to fall on the woman more because she does care more. Uh but hopefully, as we're raising the next generation, we can raise boys to care too and to take responsibility for things. Because the simple fact is that right now, marriage has more benefit for men than it does for women.
Yeah.
And you see that like married men live longer than
Mhm.
single men. Married women don't in the same way. Married men have much better rates of mental health, much better relationships with their kids. Like if a woman dies first, often a man loses his whole social circle because she tended to be the one who was making sure that we were calling the kids on a weekly basis, that we were getting together for euchre parties with the friends, right? And so when she's gone, he's often very alone.
Right.
Whereas when he's gone, she's usually not.
Yeah.
Right? So marriage brings a lot of benefits for women or for men that it doesn't necessarily bring for women.
Right.
Um, and and women are feeling that.
Yeah.
And so as we see more and more people, especially on the right side of the spectrum, yelling at women, and it is become a yelling,
It is becoming yelling. Yeah.
yeah, that you need to realize that your priorities are wrong. And you need to realize that having babies is the thing that gives you the biggest joy. Well, they would be doing a lot better if they started talking to men and saying, you need to realize that if you are in an equal partnership, that is going to give you both so many benefits.
Right.
And you're going to enjoy your marriage and enjoy your life a lot more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And well, and again, as we've just discussed, like framing this into like an economics and labor market argument, we like it would be so much easier to have that conversation with men. Like
Yeah.
actually, like
Hmm.
we're already in an economic and a social environment where women are expected to participate in the labor force. They make up a huge, the majority
Hmm.
of the labor force. And in the US anyway, Black women are the most educated segment of the population.
Yes. Yeah.
So kind of want them to stay in the labor force, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, but conversely, their health outcomes, their unemployment rate and everything is um
Hmm.
bad. Like
Hmm.
it just is. And I think it's ludicrous to think that women are suddenly going to become pregnant more.
Hmm.
Um if if we don't fix this, like you said. Like it's just you're I mean, even just like your own sense of safety and like
Mhm.
physical well-being. It's like, why on earth would I put myself in a situation of being pregnant?
Yeah.
Um, which is like an extremely, if we get into like, kind of like the lizard brain stuff of it, that's an extremely vulnerable state for a woman
Mhm.
to be in. And your body knows that. Like if, we can get kind of like body, embodied and everything in this conversation, but
Mhm.
like, you know, it's not, the data makes perfect sense. And to anyone's like intuition, like looking at it, it's like, yeah, I am not really going to be in a position where I'm carrying another life around and I'm really sick all the time and my mobility is, limited and everything. If I'm being like, first of all, threatened into this by people
Yes.
yelling at me about my priorities.
Yeah.
Um, but also knowing, like, economically, this is gonna put me at a huge disadvantage, like, I could lose
Mhm.
my job, it's supposed to be illegal, but, and I don't have paid maternity leave. Let's talk about paid leave for
Yeah, I
a
was about to
second.
bring that up
Let's
'cause
so we're talking about safety and everything,
yeah.
so, what are one of the reasons why women might not feel safe specifically in the US to get pregnant?
I mean, and it's funny. Every time anyone from Canada or Europe or Australia reads an article from the US about childcare and about the difficulty, with managing childcare, y'all need to understand that we are picturing a 2-year-old. We're not picturing a 3-month-old
Right.
because we all have maternity leave. And
So ashamed.
my oldest child is 30 years old. And when she was born 30 years ago, I had a full year of maternity leave.
Oh my gosh.
And the Chrétien government had just brought in the full year. Until then, it had been 6 months.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so we had, and when you're on maternity leave, you get, your job cannot be taken from you. If you get raises based on like how long you've worked, you still will get those raises as
Gotcha.
if you had been at work. Um, And if you automatically get promoted, like in the military, for instance, if you automatically get to be master corporal after a certain amount of
Mhm.
time, you will still get that, even if you're on mat leave or pat leave. You can take it over 12 months. You can also take it over 18 months, but you're only paid for 12 months. But so the money's just stretched out over 18 months.
Mhm.
But yeah, you can't lose your job. And the cool thing is that a lot of young people get their start on mat leave positions. Mat leave positions are really, really sought after because you can get a fairly high level position for just a year, which gives you incredible experience.
That I never even thought of that, like, even
Yeah.
another thing we're dealing with economically in the US is the Gen Z employment rate is bad. Their
Hmm.
unemployment rate right now is, like, 11%, like,
Yeah.
for entering the workforce for the first time. It's really disturbing,
Yeah.
and that's such a good point that if more, senior workers were being able to take these, like, paid leaves, like you said,
Hmm.
that's
Well, yeah,
so
because if someone's gone for a year, you have to fill that
right,
position.
yeah, they can't just
So,
yeah.
yeah. Whereas if someone's gone for 8 weeks, you usually just make everyone around you work harder, which
Right.
means there's a lot of resentment towards anyone who gets pregnant because you're now causing more work for me.
You're
Whereas if it's a mat leave position, you're training your replacement.
right.
So you
Yeah.
train your replacement, then you leave, and then you come back. And often they get hired in the same company for another job because now people have seen them for a year, right? So,
Right.
yeah. So it works out great.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna go down this rabbit hole a little bit. In Canada, how does that like, who pays for that? Because, obviously the big question over here is like,
Mhm.
firms can't afford that and like whatever, and so I'm interested to know, like, the mechanics behind,
So
that entirely.
it's a federal program. It's paid for out of our employment insurance. So, employers and employees pay a certain percentage of your wages into the employment insurance pot, and that covers when you're unemployed. So it covers your unemployment. It covers mat leave. It covers family leave for emergencies or whatever.
Right.
So it ends up being, a certain percentage of your payroll if you're an employer, but it's across everybody, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not
So
onerous on anyone.
right, and, spoiler alert for the US listeners, we're already doing that. We already pay unemployment taxes and
Mhm.
unemployment withholding as employers and as employees, so it's not that we don't have the system set up, it's that
Yeah.
we refuse to make the policy decision to make that an option and to, maybe increase that tax, but as you said, it's spread across everybody. It's not
Mhm.
like, I mean, as we've seen with many other benefits programs federally, it's like usually it's like, oh, if we need another $1 billion, everybody pays like $1 more in taxes.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool. If that
Yeah.
means more food stamps for everybody, like I'm all down. Like I
Mhm.
don't need that dollar. Um, so okay. So that's fascinating. It's like
Yeah, and you and the father like either parent can take it.
right.
So so it doesn't have to be her. And yeah, so it works like it's great. And the thing is, this is what like the US is the only developed nation who does not do this.
Hmm.
You're the only one.
Yeah.
Every other developed nation
You're like it
has
just blows our
maternity leave
minds.
and some and like 6 months of maternity leave would be considered like low,
Right.
not very generous.
Here, it would be considered that's like a luxury. Like, I've heard of people being like, "Oh, I have 4 months of paternity leave. Like, this is,
Yeah.
paid paternity leave. This is a luxury." Well, first of all, the employer's having to pay for that because the government sure isn't.
Mhm.
And like you said, like, compared to everybody else, it's like, okay, a 4-month-old baby is still, like, a 4-month-old baby,
They're not sleep
and
most aren't sleeping through the night. Like,
oh.
you're exhausted. I know with my first daughter, I had a really bad tear. I wasn't walking for 6 weeks.
Right.
Like, I can't imagine. Like, there's
Mhm.
no like, to me, this is a human rights thing. My youngest daughter, her baby, she just had a really hard first 6 months for various reasons,
Right.
and there is no way she could possibly have gone back to work. Absolutely no way. Um, and I just think like, yeah, I see this in the same way as child labor laws. Like babies need their moms, or their dads, but babies just need that care, that consistent caregiver. Because the whole point in that first year of life is a baby needs to learn I am important and my needs will be met,
Right.
you know?
So
And
if
so
we
they,
want more babies and we want them to be healthy and
yeah,
yeah, I think that's where, a lot of the rhetoric about more babies kind of gets lost is like, okay, but like more babies in an environment where they and their parents are not going to be well,
yeah,
what does that mean? Like
yeah,
that's not good for anybody. Like you end up with an unhealthier population, which we know costs everybody more than if we
hmm,
put in the supports in place to make it a successful venture
yeah.
for everybody. I mean, the economics of it is just like it's actually really that simple.
Yeah, and even like when you look at studies on daycare, right? So a lot of the studies on daycare that come out of the US show how dangerous it is,
Yes.
and the increased rates of hospitalizations, et cetera. But we always have to remember, and my husband's a pediatrician, so we always have to remember when reading those studies is that they are talking about 4-month-old babies.
Right.
No 4-month-old baby in Europe or Canada or anywhere else would be in daycare.
Right. Yeah.
you know?
They'd be like
And
walking
RSV,
probably.
like RSV is really dangerous when you get it at 4 months old. And it
Mhm.
does go through daycares,
Right.
you know? So it's
Or
like,
like
yeah.
measles, because we're having a whole measles thing right
Yes.
now.
Yes.
And
So are
that,
we. So are we.
yeah.
Like we've got the anti-vaxxers too. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, it's like the conglomeration of all those various camps of thought right now are really creating a stew of very, very fun
Yes.
times.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
really am just like, wow. So we want more children. We don't want to pay for food or healthcare for them. We don't want to pay for leave for their parents to take care of them. We want to shove them into daycares with all these communicable diseases because none of y'all want to get shots. Like,
Yeah.
really, it's just working so great. The sarcasm is hopefully
Yes.
clear.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
because like, yeah, if you want more babies, you need to be able to care for them. Like the stuff, and I think Canada has a great system. But I mean, uh, my brother is in Denmark, and they got 2 years, and then childcare is free after that.
cool.
So,
Yeah.
and it's really high quality. Like their teachers and their childcare workers are paid very well. So it's
Right.
like, you're not paid dirt, right? Like it's a very well paid
Right. Well,
position.
and to your point of like the dangers of childcare here in the US, it's like we treat it like it's an entry level whatever job, like you're
Mhm.
working fast food or something. And it's like these are babies, as you
Yeah.
said. Like if we paid caretakers and teachers and whatnot, what's commensurate with what the actual task is, which if you stop and think about it is like a big deal.
Yeah.
It would not be these wages that are laughable. And then we wouldn't
Yeah.
have these hospitalization outcomes like you were just talking about of,
Yeah.
it yeah. And right
And
now.
part of the problem, like one of the things that Denmark does, obviously, is, daycare workers are publicly paid. And so they can be paid more. In Canada, we're sort of moving towards that. We have a strange system right now, but there's, a lot of it is still private. And in private daycares, you simply can't afford to pay very well. You
Right.
can't
Yeah.
because the parents aren't necessarily making very much money.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those decisions that societies need to make is how much are we going to invest
Right.
in our babies and children? And on the whole, America has chosen not to invest in it, but to put that unpaid labor onto women.
Yes.
Right. And so they're relying on women to still be the unpaid labor. So they're relying on women to leave the labor force and do all of the childcare, even though this is increasingly economically unviable with the cost of living, et cetera. And they're still relying on women to carry the majority of the mental load, even if they do, work outside the home too. And it just creates a situation where having kids is really hard,
Right. Yeah. Why would
even
you have?
if you want them. Because if you ask women, most women still want to have kids.
Yes. Yeah.
you know?
I remember that Al Mohler article coming out and basically being like, women just don't want to have kids. And I was like, I'm not sure,
Yeah.
that's the whole story is just, it's really hard to have kids right now. And
Hmm.
it's not weird for us to, we're just critically thinking about,
Yeah.
okay, well, it costs this much for daycare and I'm only going to get 6 weeks off work. And like,
Oh,
yeah,
and the other one I didn't even mention is you have to pay to have your baby delivered.
yes.
Oh my gosh.
Well, the lack of universal healthcare in this country is a whole, and the government run healthcare that we do have has just been slashed by almost $1 billion thanks to the big
Right.
beautiful bill.
And that's something that nobody else ever thinks about. Like
I
I
Yeah.
have never once I had a son in the NICU who had massive heart surgery at a month of age. She didn't make it,
Okay.
unfortunately. But like that would have cost probably $1 million
Yes.
in the US, like everything that he went through.
Right. Yeah. It's almost criminal, like
Yeah.
when you think about it, and it's just the I think it's hard for me to think about it without getting super like emotionally charged about, as you said, it's a human rights issue. Like we're
Yeah.
treating people almost like cattle in this country, and then we're confused as to why they don't want to have kids and like all this kind
Yeah.
of thing. And when I like try to step back from it and go like, what is driving this though? Because it's not just the powers that be. There are like plenty of individuals who are like, this is the right way. And in the US, we have this weird definition of like what personal responsibility is and like,
Hmm.
what, taking care of ourselves and not being beholden to not relying on others to care for us. It's
Right.
highly individualistic. And of course, a lot of other countries look at us and go like, okay, that's a weird way to look at it. But I think it really does stem from this idea, or at least on the individual level, from the oligarchy level. It's 100% exploitation, and they know what they're doing, and I have no sympathy
Yeah.
for them. But on the individual level, especially in like the evangelical spaces that you do your
Hmm.
research in, I think what's sold, and you see it with like the personal faith and like all this kind of like, is just that
Hmm.
everything's on you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and if you are like, hey, I really need help with like childcare or healthcare or whatever, it's because you didn't try hard enough. You're not taking enough
Yeah.
responsibility for your fate and your family and whatever. You're not making enough money to do
Hmm.
it. You're just a deadbeat. Like there's a lot of like that chatter that happens. And I'm speaking as someone who used to lean much more conservative politically and economically. And but again, data, we love it. We love data because it kind
Yeah.
of shows us that, when we do collective social programs and social work, it's actually less expensive for everybody. Like
Mhm.
the costs of uncompensated care in the US are astronomical. And as we're slashing Medicaid, which is one of the, safety nets, safety nets, social safety nets
Yeah.
we have here, it's gonna like skyrocket. It's like we are gonna spend more, and by we I mean the individuals,
Mhm.
while again that kind of like the powers that be, they're the ones who make out, because it's just so frustrating. But I understand, like I know where it's coming from as far as like what's propping it up. People are
Yeah.
afraid to look like they're not taking responsibility for their lives, and it's just like it's just
Mhm.
is what it is.
Yeah, and that is the unique American outlook, I think, that other countries don't have in the same way. Because yeah, Canada spends less per capita on, on healthcare than the US does if you combine all
Right.
the costs. And our outcomes are not that different, honestly. Like in some cases we're better,
Yeah.
infant mortality and things like that. So, it is a big, we certainly were a lot better in COVID. Um,
Yeah.
so
God.
yeah, like it is a big, it's a choice that
Right.
America has made. And one of the things that we haven't mentioned yet about fertility is we do see American exceptionalism there too, because America's fertility has actually stayed high compared to Canada's and Europe's. And so it's easy to say, oh yeah, but you guys have all these social programs and your fertility is going, is lower. And that's what I used to think too when I was more on the conservative side, is like, the social programs actually aren't helping fertility at all. But that's not true. What's happening is that America's fertility is artificially high, and it shouldn't be as high as it is. And the reason it's artificially high is that you have a lot more religion. Um, your population is a lot more religious, and it tends to be more evangelical than in other nations where they really do stress the importance of having kids, etc. And your immigrant communities are having a lot of children.
Right.
And so it is propping up your fertility rates, more than in other nations. But that means that you're relying on evangelical women to keep having babies in the same number. And I don't think, as someone who studies evangelical women, I don't think that's going to happen. I think in
Right.
the next 10 years, we are going to see a massive number of evangelical divorces. Like it's going to be huge
Right.
once evangelical women figure out that they don't need to put up with second class status, and that, it's okay to divorce even if he hasn't cheated on you. Like if he's abusive, it's okay to divorce. We're going to see a lot more divorces.
Right.
And we're just seeing a lot of evangelical women are saying, there are no men for me to marry because all of the men in my church watch porn. They blame me for not being modest enough. They want me to quit my job and get back at home. And they're all sexist. And I am treated with more respect in the workplace than I am in the church. And so we're already seeing Gen Z women leave the church at much higher numbers than Gen Z men. So that, sorry, I'm Canadian. I just have to say Gen Z.
No, it's fine. I love it.
So that like Gen Z women who are nuns, like who don't have a religious affiliation, now outnumber Gen Z men who are nuns. And that's never happened before.
Right.
It's never happened before that there's a generation where the women are more irreligious than the men are.
Yeah.
Um,
They used to be the ones driving the religiosity of
Right. So that's a seismic shift. And I just think in the next 10 years, we're going to see that relying on evangelical women to do things like prop up that fertility rate. I mean, even the fact that Al Mohler needed to talk about it already means that we're already starting to see women, opting out
right.
and saying no. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we're seeing that we see kind of the opposite side of that shift where, Trump got a lot of support from Gen Z men. Like that was huge like swing as far as like when it came to younger voters, it was primarily men. And yeah, I think that it's when we were talking earlier about like who wins in the current arrangement of things, it's men. And they're like, oh, don't, this person is like maybe going to help me retain the winning combination that I already have. And I'm frightened maybe at the idea of losing that combination. Again, getting back to our original point of it actually doesn't have to be a lose-win. Like this is not, doesn't have to be zero. I think that's the big conclusion, right? This doesn't have to be zero sum, y'all.
That's right.
It's not men versus women. It's literally just treating each other like human beings. And that is, I think that's what we need to start talking about. Like, the history of humanity is when we cooperate more and we're more collaborative and community focused and whatnot, we achieve better outcomes.
We do. We really do.
We have more babies. We're all richer. Like it really is better.
Yeah. Our babies live longer when we do have them. Yeah.
Everyone's happier. Like it's just like this. It is it's a false. It's a false zero sum. Like it doesn't actually exist. It's just been kind of propped up as like if women have egalitarianism, men will lose. And it's like,
Yeah. And
okay.
I mean, to be fair, they do lose some privilege. Like right now, men have the privilege of not having to do the dishes, of not
Right.
having to figure out what we're making for dinner tonight.
Right.
What men lose in the current situation is what true intimacy is.
Right.
The
Yeah.
problem is they don't always realize what it means to lose that because they've never had it.
Right. Right, which is a whole could
Yeah.
go on a whole thing about the social what society
Yeah.
has taught us about what that even means,
Hmm.
and why men don't experience it as often as they
Yeah.
could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to give up privilege when you've had it, for
Oh, yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But what I hope that more and more men are seeing, and honestly, there's a lot of good data that millennial and Gen Z dads are pretty awesome, like
Oh, yeah.
compared to, you know,
I'm a millennial, and I can attest that,
yeah,
I'm married to a pretty good dad. Like,
yeah,
he's good at it. Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Both my sons-in-law are amazing, you know, like, yeah, my one son-in-law took my granddaughter to her speech therapy appointment this morning to do all the catch up on it because he's the, you know, like they're just totally involved, right?
right.
Like, um, and
And they
they're
don't and
seeing
they're
the
not
benefits of that.
right, and they're not even, like, thinking about it that hard. They're not going like, "Look at me." I'm like,
No.
it's because that's,
Yeah.
I think, the insufferable part is, like, for men who do it kind of on a performative basis of, like,
Hmm.
"I took the kids to the doctor's appointment,"
Yeah.
all these, like, funny internet memes of, like, "Would you like a medal for that?" Or, like,
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
"Thanks for taking care of your
Hmm.
child." Um, yeah, but I think I do be respectful of your time, and you've been so generous, Sheila. But I do love to wrap up on kind of hopeful and actionable steps in these
Hmm.
conversations, just because I want to make sure. Whenever I'm talking to my audience, I'm always like, I don't want to get you all enraged, and then like
Yeah.
you're just sitting there mad about the
Yeah.
state of the world. So, is there anything you would like to leave the audience with as far as you know, start how do you start the conversation? Where do you put like what are the buttons you're
Hmm.
pushing? And maybe some more hopeful notes about like where we're headed generationally even.
Yeah. Okay. So what we did find is that if you make a huge deal out of all of these things in the first few years of marriage, you're going to do so much better.
Mm,
So we measured something which we called the unfairness threshold, and we saw the same chart or pattern in the data across a number of different measures, whether it was housework, whether it was having unfulfilling sex where she never reaches orgasm, whether it was who does the kin keeping for my side of the family. Whenever it's unfair and women are taking on more of the burden, for the first 5 years, it doesn't matter that much to her. Like she's okay with it. You know, by year 10, she's getting really bothered. By year 15, she's just about had it. And by year 20, she's off and out the door.
bye.
Right. And so, what I've been trying to tell couples is if something is unfair and you're like, yeah, but it's not that big a deal, and it's year 3, it will be a huge deal by year 13. So, make it a huge deal now. It's just because the things that you do in those first few years of marriage really do set up the trajectory for where your marriage is going. So if you can make things huge deals early, then they often don't develop into those really bad patterns later.
Right.
And most people want good marriages.
Right.
You know, like the reason people get married, if you are married, is because, you know, he wants a good marriage too. And often in those early years, like your husband, you know, they're willing to work on things.
Right.
Um, but the big thing I would say too to women is like, just don't settle, you know, don't settle. Um, every day I get dozens of emails from women who are in terrible relationships that they wish now they hadn't gotten into.
Right.
And they knew they could see the red flags earlier, but they were told that no, marriage is going to make you happy and everything. And it's like, yeah, you know, there's no lonelier place to be than in a bad marriage.
Yeah.
And you're
Well, and
worth
we're
more than
also
that.
in the evangelical space, we're taught like it's like your cross to bear or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
that rhetoric too of like that it's making you holier or whatever.
Yeah. And it's not.
Yeah.
And none of this, the thing is, none of this is actually Christian. Like, none of this is actually
Yeah.
Christian.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just what the largely American church has made of gender roles. And so, you know, find community wherever you can find it. Build great community. Build your own social safety nets, even if the government isn't. Like, if you want a village, you need to be a villager, right? So,
I love that.
like, show up for people.
Yeah.
Bring a new mom a lasagna. Well, don't bring her only lasagna because everyone brings lasagnas and you get really sick of lasagnas pretty fast. But like,
tacos is my favorite. I bring a taco bar.
Yeah.
That is my
Yeah. Oh,
favorite.
that's awesome. Yes,
Yeah.
bring taco bar. But like, yeah, be a villager, because even if the government isn't necessarily providing for you, I think we need to be looking out for our own neighbors, and we can build something pretty great that way too.
I love that.
So, yeah.
Sheila, what should people be getting right now? You have a new book out.
Yes, so The Marriage You Want is our newest book on marriage, and it's so much fun if you're a chart person. There are so many charts in this thing. Yeah. It is so much fun of like what actually works for making marriage happy. And it's not like everyone talks about, oh, it's all about communication. I mean, yes, but no, it's really more about, like, that's secondary. It's really more about priorities. Like, how do you see priority? How do you divide up responsibilities? How do you, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so you can check out The Marriage You Want, and check me out at Bear Marriage. We have the Bear Marriage podcast. BearMarriage.com is where I hang out. And yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, can attest. Listen to the podcast every week. You just came out with another episode that I'm going to listen to this weekend. But
yeah,
it's
how not to give your kids sexual hangups. Yeah,
which is honestly very timely. And yeah, Sheila, thank you so much for your time today, and for letting me steer you in this kind of like economic sociological direction a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, and I really appreciate you, and kind of giving to I know my audience has plenty of evangelical / ex-evangelical listeners, and I look forward to posting these clips on like social and whatnot. But kind of showing like the pervasiveness of these social norms, like how they've really kind of entered everything, and that there is a better way. So your work is so appreciated.
Thank you.
Like I said, I'm always like hunting for like the data-driven people. I'm like, I need charts, I need research, I don't want to hear your opinions. I don't want to hear your opinions, but your opinions are informed.
Yes.
So I love it. So thank you for all you do, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.